Hi, I'm Andrew from Atomic Contraptions, and I'm going to be taking you through my custom CB750 called Douglas. I'm a designer by trade, designer, photographer, that kind of area of business. I got into motorcycling kind of 10 to 15 years ago just for the joy of riding, and started tinkering as you do. I ended up sort of buying a little old CB350 clunker. Was my first kind of project bike, and that was just to pull apart and kind of see how it all went together again, and a bit of mechanical work. And so after I did all that, I sort of tore it all down and started to put it all back together again. I decided at that point that, well, I might as well do something creative with it as well. That's kind of the guy I am. So then I just kind of went a bit crazy on that, and yeah, and so that's sort of where it stemmed from. After that, I kind of got the bug for customizing bikes and having something unique to ride. So that's where Douglas sort of came in. I got that one as a bit of a proof of concept idea of, okay, I really want to do this more seriously. You know, how far can I go? How far can I take it? And so that's kind of how Douglas started, was just an experiment in doing whatever I wanted with a motorbike. Yeah, so the first bike I built, I started building when my grandmother wasn't well, or just after she passed, and that was called Isabel, which is my grandmother's middle name. So I kind of named my first bike after my grandmother. And then this second bike, being a kind of a bigger bike, and I don't know, felt like it was more of a boy bike, named it after my grandfather, who recently passed as well. And so that's his middle name. So it's kind of a bit of a nod to my heritage and my grandparents. Yeah, it's a bit of a personal touch. Why the CB750? Mostly, well, a bit about it, I guess. It was when it was first released in 1969, it was the first CB750 that Honda released. It was the first bike that ever got called a superbike. It was a real revolution for motorcycling at the time. The bike itself's got a pretty good heritage for being quite a well-known bike. It was a 5-year process, because we just sold our house, and then I bought the bike while we were renting. Then we bought a new house, which was a couple of years later, and then we had to renovate, and so like the bike kind of got built in about 3 or 4 different houses. I built the engine kind of in the attic of one house, and I built the frame in the garage of a different house, and so it wasn't a very linear build. It was very lots of bits being built everywhere on the go at the same time. Engine was the first thing because it was easy to do in a bedroom or whatever. I didn't have to sort out the frames, so the engine was literally torn down to split the cases to the bare bones to see how much damage was done. So yeah, the engine was kind of the first thing, and I sort of staged it like that. I went, okay, I'm going to do, this is the engine, I'll get the engine done, and then okay, I'll get the frame and the wheels and get the stance right, and then once the engine's in the frame, and you start to be able to sit back and look at it and go, okay, what does it need? What do I always wanted inverted levers. I loved inverted levers. They're just one of those kind of cool things of that era, so I wanted some of those. So then I had to figure out how to make that work with hydraulic brakes, and gauges was another one. Like I kind of had a very clear idea for the gauges. I wanted the same timber that was on the seat to be the back of the gauges, and the whole handlebar was kind of, the inverted levers, the handlebars, the grips, the gauges was then kind of another section to sort of go, okay, that's that bit. And then when I sort of finally got into this garage and could put it all together, sort of got all those elements together, and then went, okay, well, what's missing? What do I need? And then the tank was kind of the biggest point. At that point with the tank, I was a bit stumped, really. I just kind of couldn't get a tank that I liked. And so I had a guy who lives 2 doors up the road, just came by, a neighbour, and he sort of does a little bit of his own, makes his own kind of electric bicycles and stuff. And he'd had an old tank that he was going to use, and I was telling him I had a blank about the tank, and he said, oh, we'll see what you think of this. And so he brought the tank around, and I went, that's perfect, that's exactly the kind of shape I wanted. So I kind of, chopped that tank up, so I sort of widened it and deepened it and changed the shape a little bit, and that kind of just put the icing on the cake, I guess. I think it is. It's still the seat. That's kind of how the bike started. That's where the idea of the bike began, and so that's probably still my favourite part of it. It was probably the most tricky thing to do too, as well. The curve of the seat in the timber and the light to be filleted in, and the leather to wrap, and it all to be functional and structural, and it sort of looks relatively simple, but there's quite a bit of thought into how I was going to go about doing it. So the seat's definitely one of my favourite parts, and then using the buttons. So the buttons I've used are actually the uniform buttons from the World War II RAF officer's uniform. So my grandfather Douglas, who the bike's named after, was in the RAF in World War II, and so the buttons are off the uniform of the same era of when my grandfather was in the war. And so just using little touches like that, and sort of all those little things that kind of, I guess, make it a really personal thing, is really kind of encapsulated in the seat, but it sort of flows onto the rest of the bike as well.